Do you guys remember? I think it was last spring, 2020, back in March, April, Donald Trump was coming out making very bizarre pronouncements on the issue of COVID-19. For example, this one, where he's basically saying that people are going to be celebrating.
Avoiding large gatherings and hand washing and all of the other things that everybody knows they're supposed to be doing. Ultimately, the goal is to ease the guidelines and open things up to very large sections of our country as we near the end of our historic battle with the invisible enemy. It'll go on for a while, but we win. We win. I said earlier today that I hope we can do this by Easter. I think that would be a great thing for our country, and we're all working very hard to make that a reality. We'll be meeting with a lot of people to see if it can be done.
Now, this is when Donald Trump caught flack for basically saying the churches are going to be open on Easter and people are going to be able to congregate and everything. And I think at the time when Donald Trump said this, I'm not quite sure what the death rate was, but we were still number one, I think, in the number of deaths, or at the very least traveling to the number one spot. And people were like, Donald Trump has lost his mind. Now, Donald Trump is reality show host. What experience does he have with epidemiology? Or for that matter, what experience does he have on issues of war and peace, on issues of military? He has to rely on the people around him. And the people who are around him would say, this is the ideology that we're focusing on from the standpoint of military policy. But what about healthcare? What about healthcare? Donald Trump clearly wanted the economy to be his shining star. He thought that was the thing that was going to get him reelected, if nothing else. And so when COVID hits and the economy gets decimated and he's basically shutting things down with a clear impetus, this needs to open as soon as possible. This is going to hurt the economy. They're trying to keep it shut. He started attacking Fauci because Fauci was basically saying this is going to get worse. This is going to get worse. And at the time, we might have been at 1,000 deaths. Maybe, if we were unfortunate for that particular day. Last week, we're at 4,000 a day. I think we hit 4,400 at one point. It was 3,000 at the very least consistently, day after day after day after day. We're at 420,000 deaths, not to mention the 28 million people infected. This, year later. But I'm making the point that this was the argument coming out of the White House. And notice Fauci is back there standing behind him. It's symbolic, but it's also there to get across something that's real. That the president is supposedly backed by scientists who are supposed to help him with this particular task. The thing is, Fauci wasn't the only scientist that was there. In fact, Fauci wasn't even the most influential at that time. Fauci was popular, but if you remember, Fauci was getting into big fights with Donald Trump. Why would Trump come out here and say this? You could say he's an egomaniac. You could say that his level of mendacity was at Jordan level of skill. You could say that, but you can also say that Donald Trump, yes, wanted the economy to open back up. And yes, like all leaders, have the person, the credentialed individual that would tell them what they want to hear. And in telling them what they want to hear, they go through with horrific policy decisions. This person was Dr. Birx. Now, Dr. Birx, I remember the New York Times did an article on basically what was taking place in the White House. Birx was Trump's whisperer. That was the person who would basically tell Donald Trump that things are going to be okay, things are going to be particularly fine, we're going to be able to open this stuff back up pretty soon, giving Donald Trump these glowing, utopian pronouncements of how things were going to be. We're going to be running in the forest. We're going to be touching daisies as we run through the plains. This was the thought process. But that process ended up being monstrously wrong. Now, Birx, who at this point has to be responsible and culpable on some level just from the advice that she was giving Donald Trump, the rosy pronouncements, there's some level of culpability, whatever that number is, for her to come out and try to rehabilitate her image after basically being the person that was giving Trump the rosy pronouncements for him to take the policy he did in the first place, it's a bridge too far. It's a bridge too far. It's wanting to blame everything on Trump. And yeah, you could say that Donald Trump clearly had a point of view. You could say that he might have been pushing the experts to give him that particular point of view. But not all of them did that. Birx did. The question is, did Birx really believe her rosy pronouncements? Now, at one point, Birx pulled back. But for the longest time, Birx was only powered by delusional thinking, and Donald Trump was basically powered by self-interest. And these two things dovetailed to give us hundreds of thousands of deaths with remarkably bad medical advice. I'm going to show you Birx today, or yesterday, when she's in the interviews, the post-interviews after the administration. And all of the stuff that's being said now almost acts as if the other stuff that was responsible for a lot of deaths didn't exist. I'm going to show you Donald Trump's whisperer, if you want to call it that. Dr. Birx, welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity for allowing me to do it. I saw the exit interview with Dr. Birx, and I thought to myself, there is no way this woman is going to skate out of here as if she had nothing to do with it, was not responsible for the number of lives lost. Donald Trump's perspective, yes, he wanted to open the economy back up. No, he didn't necessarily want to shut the businesses down. No, he didn't want to attend to the needs of the American population by ensuring those people got a check. Because if you do that, if you attend to the needs of the population month after month after month, the impetus, the need for those people to go back to work lessens. Meaning the entire point of the policy was to get people to not have resources, to get people desperate, where those people will foment and push to get back to work, even if getting back to work was not in their physical best interest. Yes, I may put myself and my life on the line to get back into this job. However, I have a wife, a kid, and a mortgage. What am I going to do? Meaning they wanted to put people in such dire straits that based on their needs in and of themselves, their ability to go hungry, their ability to go thirsty, basically their base needs as a human being, using those as leverage to get those people to go back into a hazardous, potentially anyway, situation. That's the reason why they weren't giving $2,000 a month, Democrats or Republicans. It's for that basic point. Birx was brought in with a background from HIV and AIDS. Now, this is Science magazine. I'm just going to read this part because this is great. When Birx, a physician with a background in HIV and AIDS research, was named coordinator to the task force in February, she was widely praised as a tough, indefatigable manager and a voice of data-driven reason. But some of her actions have undermined the effectiveness of the world's preeminent public health agency, according to Science magazine or Science Investigation. Interviews with 9 current CDC employees and several of the top senior agency leaders and 20 former agency leaders and public health experts, as well as a review for more than 100 official emails, memos, and other documents, suggests that Birx's hospital data takeover fits a pattern in which she opposed CDC guidance, sometimes promoting Donald Trump's policies or views against the scientific consensus. She ended up being a yes woman. And again, it's hard to know where one begins and the other ends. The information and the data she was giving Trump, was she giving Donald Trump that because she wanted to please her boss? Or was she giving Trump that because she actually believed in the data showed it? Fauci wasn't giving these rosy pronouncements, and Donald Trump was attacking Fauci because he wasn't giving these rosy pronouncements. And the problem for Trump was that Fauci had like a 70-something% approval rating, was monstrously trusted, especially from the standpoint of the administration that had like a 30% or less approval and even less of a trust rating. Meaning Fauci had to be there because that was a public person, and regardless of how much Trump hated him and disliked him, he was the credibility that they needed to be beside them. meaning they could only attack him so much. Birx was basically the behind-the-scenes person, a person that you wasn't seeing all that often, but was influential on Donald Trump's framing of this virus. That framing got hundreds of thousands of people killed. This, Dr. Birx, this was back in March of 2020. Listen to Birx, Dr. Birx.
Bring over the last few weeks to really understand who's at the greatest risk for.
How would you describe the job President Trump is doing behind the scenes and in front of the cameras during these daily briefings that we're seeing? What's been your perspective, Dr. Birx?
He's been so attentive to the scientific literature and the details and the data. And I think his ability to analyze and integrate data that comes out of his long history in business has really been a real benefit during these discussions about medical issues. Because in the end, data is data, and he understands the importance of the granularity. And I think he's been really excited about finding the level of detail that we've been able to now bring over the last few weeks to really understand who's at the greatest risk for severe illness, who will have mild and less and asymptomatic disease, and really calling on every American to do that social distancing, because some people may not know they're actually infected and be unknowingly spreading the virus. And that all comes from the president seeing the data and then really directing these policies and these guidelines that go out to the American people.
That's Dr. Birx. That's Dr. Birx. The full-throated applause of Donald Trump, of the president. That's her boss. And for Dr. Birx to get out there and say something like that, do you realize that the White House, and the reason why many of these people were getting ill is because there was a culture of not wearing masks. That wearing masks were unmanly. And it wasn't something that was done because people didn't necessarily like to get on the president's bad side. Dr. Birx standing out here basically saying Trump is a data guy. Donald Trump had bankruptcy like 7 different times. He was a failed businessman. And when his taxes were revealed, he had like $1 billion in losses from his taxes. I mean, from the businesses. He said himself he was the king of debt because he kept failing. People, all things being equal, don't necessarily like to be king of debt. They like to be the king of profit, which was something that he was not. And now we found out he was selling pardons out the back room garage of the White House. I'm making the point that this is so unhinged and unconnected to reality. 420,000 people have been set on fire as a result of the policies that Donald Trump enacted. Many of those policies, especially from the origin of those policies, coming directly from you. And here you are, giving full-throated endorsement to a president that got 420,000 people killed. Whatever that number is, let's say he was culpable for 200,000, you still get my point. The policies that he implemented, the behavior that was going from the top was directly culpable for all of these deaths and all of this misery. Think for the moment of the number of people that are infected. Think of the people who had illness going forward. Think about what would have taken place if the policy put forth was a lockdown, was people getting the resources that they needed for 2 or 3 months as it blew over and as we mitigated the worst edges of this. This is the worst of both worlds. We've basically had a half-ass lockdown for over a year with a virus that just last week was killing 4,000 people a day. 9/11 killed how many? 3,000? And we've had a situation of basically an event of greater magnitude, 9/11, every day for nearly 6 months. For Birx to say this is remarkably embarrassing. That she would stand here with a straight face and make this argument when all of the seeds and everything basically pointed to a disgruntled, or at the very least, a disaffected, out of touch, tone deaf, incompetent White House. And whether it's the mask that they didn't have enough of because Donald Trump wasn't using the Defense Production Act, like all of these things were foreseeable at the point where she was making this. And yet she still comes out talking about Donald Trump got this in the bag because he's a data-driven guy. He got 400,000 people killed. 420,000 mothers, fathers, daughters, kids gone up in flames based on your tutelage of this president. At some point, Birx had a come to Jesus moment. And Birx realized that she was wrong and that the information she was giving Trump wasn't necessarily legit. Because after all, if you're a scientist and you're making a hypothesis and you find out that your hypothesis is wrong, then you need to revamp. You need to be honest enough with yourself and have enough integrity in yourself to admit that, especially in the role that she's doing and the consequence that are there from that role and a failure of that role. She had enough integrity to do this. Once she did this, by the way, and once she started getting more in line with Fauci predictions of this is going to be bad, and this is going to be bad for a long time, and winter is going to make it worse, the holidays are going to be worse, these were the predictions that Fauci was making. I get Fauci lied at least on 2 occasions, but in this very specific instance, his prognostication and his predictions were correct. And I suspect Fauci was under the same pressures that she was under, which is, on some level, to conform to her boss. She was wrong, but at the very least, she could admit it. Now, this goes, well, at the time anyway, this goes to Atlas. Now, when Birx stopped giving Trump the news that he wanted, and she started getting more in her proclamations or her assessments as Fauci, Trump went to find somebody else, a gentleman named Atlas, who is not even an epidemiologist. Atlas basically pushed herd immunity, which is basically all Donald Trump wanted to hear anyway. This guy with alphabets around his name is basically saying herd immunity is a legitimate argument. So that's what we're going to run with. And that's what he did. I'm just making the point that in all of these situations, Donald Trump just wanted to hear something very specific. And if you were giving him that, that's all he wanted. The reality of it didn't matter. And so when Atlas comes in and gives Trump this unreality as 4,000 people drop dead, well, I would imagine Birx and Fauci and these guys at that point were horrified at what was taking place. But at that point, it was too late. The policies would have needed to take place in the beginning. And our decision space got more constrained as we get further and further along. These days, Birx is talking about she thought about resigning. That's nice. And there's this tidbit that is awesome. Because the fact of the matter is, yeah, they probably were giving multiple sources of information. But this gives this kind of weird impression that she was giving Trump a certain piece of advice that Donald Trump didn't want, and he was pulling in advice from somewhere else. I'm making the point in the beginning. She was Trump's advice. Let's hit a clip.
Do you think President Trump appreciated the gravity of the health crisis you were describing?
I think the president appreciated the gravity in March. It took a while after I arrived in the White House to remove all of the ancillary data that was coming in. I mean, there was parallel data streams coming into the White House that were not transparently utilized. And I needed to stop that. Where people
You mean outside advisors?
Outside advisors coming to inside advisors, and to this day, I mean, till the day I left, I'm convinced there were parallel data streams because
Disinformation.
I saw the president presenting graphs that I never made.
She saw the president presenting graphs that she never made. Dr. Birx worked in line with Trump. Don't let her take this tact as if she was some force for good in the administration. Like I said, in the beginning months, March, April, the proclamations that Donald Trump was basically using were basically coming from her. Now she wants to eschew that. So I was trying to give him good advice. I was trying to get the information chain straight. And I suspect part of this has to do with the CDC thing, where basically the information was being the Trump administration was trying to force the information to go to their administration first before going out. Basically, they wanted to scrub the data. And again, like I read in the article, Dr. Birx even assisted with this. So clean your reputation. If you want to try to clean your reputation, I suspect mainstream media is going to let you do it. But the articles from the New York Times basically makes it clear that she was the person whispering in Trump's ear in the beginning. Yes, she came to Jesus when she realized, oh my God, people keep dying on a large scale. Maybe I was wrong. So yeah, that's good and that's fair. But don't give me this rehabilitation nonsense without dealing with that point, that Donald Trump was relying on her in the beginning stages of this to basically give these rosy pronouncements. 4,400 dead last week. And the video that I showed you where she was basically out there shucking and jiving for Trump, that what was going on behind the scenes in March. And this is the time where she's saying Donald Trump took this more seriously. Like, share, and of course, subscribe. Let's see. Yeah, this video annoyed me when I saw Birx because I thought she was trying to clean her reputation. And I was like, yeah, you're not going to clean your reputation with me, at least not, at the very least, without dealing with it. Pop Reality. He works with Biden. Oh, okay, Pop. Oh, you mean she works. Oh, you mean Fauci. I think you're saying he. Yeah, Fauci's working with Biden. I don't know if she has a job at all. Dr. Birx may be unemployed at this point. She should be unemployed at this point, considering her role in the beginning of this. So, but yeah, Fauci ends up going with Biden, and he is like a freed slave. It's the weirdest thing to see Fauci on all of these liberal shows just look like he's about to rip his shirt off. But yeah, Birx has culpability, to put it mildly. Like, share, and of course, subscribe.